Hello, it is Mark from the Shark Trust podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. My name is Mark Stokes-Packer. I'm the host, and today I'm joined by Ali Hood, our Director of Conservation. This episode is going to be slightly different from the other ones we do. This is more of an update of stuff that's happening now about our work, and hopefully something we'll be able to do a lot more often. So Ali, welcome to the episode.
Hi Mark, how you doing?
Now, Ali, you just got back from an extremely busy 10 days in Seville for ICCAT's annual meeting. So I know the work doesn't stop now, the meeting is over. So thank you for joining me. But can you kind of tell us what's going on, what's happening?
So I'm just back from the ICAT commission meeting, which was held in Seville in Spain this year. I've been back since I think what time did I get back on Tuesday night, I think. So lots going on, lots for us to talk about.
Before we get into what happened in those 10 days, can you quickly explain what ICCAT is to anyone who doesn't know what it is yet?
So what is ICCAT? So ICCAT is the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, and then in brackets at the end, and tuna-like species. And this is where the elasmobranchs, the sharks and rays, come into play. So as the sort of overarching body for Atlantic tuna management, the ICCAT Convention area, so the area which they manage, stretches from way up on the Greenland coast through the Mediterranean and down below the tip of South Africa towards Antarctica, basically. It's a huge area of management, and there are over 54 parties. So these are countries, including the EU as a bloc, who have direct interests in fishing for tuna and tuna-like species in these waters. And then there's a number of additional countries who are looking to engage with ICCAT, but aren't sort of full members of ICCAT as the commission in terms of the commission.
So we know it's a very important meeting, lots of decisions made, and they can have huge impacts. These can be both positive, but they can also be negative. If something goes through we don't want to, or if something goes through with loads of little caveats that's not going to be helpful for sharks. But can you, before we go into it, can you set the scene? Like I've said, you've been in Seville for 10 days, and I think people are going to picture the Seville of Instagram. Um, and you think you're in this Mediterranean paradise. But I know that your experience is going to be slightly different from what most people's experiences are if they've visited there this summer.
So Seville, yeah, Seville was an amazing place. I have to say that on the day we arrived, just before the compliance committee meetings, it was in the middle of that enormous storm that hit the UK as well. And Seville they're not used to rain, and this rain was phenomenal. So there was a lot of localized flooding. Unfortunately, nothing too serious, but there was a lot of water, a lot of rain. Coming from Plymouth here, we're kind of used to it, so that wasn't so bad. But fortunately for us, the weather did clear up, and Seville is an incredible city. We don't really get to see much of it. I think I'm going to write a book on tourism by night at some stage in my future, because we're down in the meeting rooms from 8:30 in the morning, sort of appearing out of the ground in the evening time. These meetings inevitably are held in windowless basement meeting rooms that can accommodate sort of 600 people. But knowing that you're there based in that old town and that old city, and having that opportunity to sort of venture out every now and again to sort of just soak up some of the atmosphere is fantastic. And I'd really recommend it somewhere people go to when they don't have to spend time at a fisheries meeting.
Yeah, it's not how I'd want to spend my time in Seville, I have to be honest. If we go straight into what is happening at this year's ICAT, so before you left, you were looking at there were some big proposals there, piles of paper on your desk, PDFs on every screen. And they're all showing potential protections or conservation measures for quite a few shark species. Can we run through those quickly? Not necessarily all of them. I'll see if we've got enough time. But just go through them first before you went to the meeting, and then we'll loop back round and see how they came out on the other side.
So yeah, the proposals that, as you say, there was a number of proposals that were put forward. It was quite a big shark year this year, from a compliance perspective. And the first 2 days of the meeting with the compliance committee having a dedicated slot. It was a year where they considered in more detail what's known as the shark check sheets. And these shark check sheets require each of the parties to report on how they're doing on numerous different shark recommendations. And one of the things that we have been working on as the Shark League with our colleagues in Ecology Action Centre and Shark Advocates International is improving the responses that countries give to these shark check sheets so that the compliance is clearer, and more transparency with respect how the recommendations of ICCAT are being addressed on a domestic scale. And over the years, we've held events and activities engaging and encouraging parties to improve their reporting, and they've risen to the challenge. There has been an overall improvement in the way the shark check sheets are completed, but we've also been working on an exemption procedure. So when a party doesn't wish to complete the check sheets because they either don't have relevant fisheries or they don't fish in the relevant hemisphere, so we have contributed to a process over the last year to improve the exemption procedure and, in fact, create a written procedure for how parties would approach this, which has been a very positive thing to be engaged in. And I'll tell you how that went shortly.
Yeah. I mean, that one sounds amazing, and I think it's kind of funny because whenever we think about shark conservation, especially as someone who, I do a lot of our social media, it's always looking for those species-specific ones, that can, the ones that I guess kind of look sexy, and sometimes it's actually the could making a process far better is the thing that's actually going to help sharks up up a lot, even though, yeah, it's not the one that everyone always thinks about. So that'd be quite an exciting one.
Yeah, there was a whole host of proposals coming forward this year. We had proposals for prohibitions on white shark and basking shark. Those were brought forward by the UK. We had proposals on fins attached, so two proposals there from the EU and the US. We had a proposal for short fin mako in the South Atlantic brought forward by the EU, and a couple of consolidated proposals from Japan and the EU, to bring together a host of shark recommendations under one paper. That wasn't something that we favoured so much. We prefer to see the time on the floor spent discussing additional issues rather than bringing together those that already exist, because we tend to see weakening of those measures when this sort of activity happens. And there was also the work, obviously, on exemption procedures for the shark check sheets and a host of other issues that came up across a number of the panels.
I mean, they all sound great. Can we just tick them off now? No, I'm not quite as naive as when I first started in that first year of ICAT. So I know what you go into this meeting with is sometimes completely different from what you come out with. Could you kind of go into a little bit of detail, talk us through what's happened for each of those proposals, just say how it's got to where it's got now?
So, what happened? How long have you got? This meeting took 10 days, and obviously, this is something that you just want to be quite succinct. So, I mean, the quick version is that the proposals were brought forward, and I can tell you what happened by the end of the meeting. But we could also then look at what happened within some of the individual proposals. So, perhaps that's a more interesting way of looking at it. Um, Sort of, I guess, one of the headlines is the basking shark and the white shark, and there was a bit of to and fro with respect to those proposals because evidence needed to come forward with them that the scientific committee, the SCRS, had decreed that these were species of the highest biological vulnerability, and this has been done. This was done earlier in the year at two different working groups. Only the way that the SCRS report is now constructed, it meant that these statements weren't explicitly within the body of the report. They were in a link from the report. So some work had to go into ensuring that it was seen very clearly that the SCRS, the scientific committee, had decreed that basking sharks and white sharks were of the highest biological vulnerability. So that work was undertaken, and fortunately, these were proposals that did go through, and we're really pleased to say that we now have new prohibitions under ICCAT with a requirement to work on safe handling, best practice, all these additional issues. So what we would call prohibition plus, a prohibition on its own is not enough. You need to then work on avoidance, work on how to ensure the highest levels of post-release survival. And so that's a body of work that will spin off these recommendations going forwards.
I mean, that's absolutely great, isn't it? Two species most people know of are getting those prohibitions. I think it's great that you've highlighted there as well, like the extra work that is going to happen off the back of that. So it's not just that they've got this prohibition, but all these extra measures that will come in place. Let's focus in on the shortfin mako. Let's go there next.
So this was the South Atlantic shortfin mako. There was a stock assessment that we contributed to earlier in the year, and the stock assessment came back with some quite sobering news that the South Atlantic mako is overfished and overfishing is occurring. So this is definitely a scenario where you'd want to see a reduction in the overall total allowable catch for mako in the South Atlantic. Now, the EU came forward with a proposal for a prohibition in the South Atlantic. At the moment, the EU can't retain mako. They have what's known as a negative non-detriment finding. This is to do with CITES and export and import permits. So the EU fleet doesn't retain mako in the South Atlantic, but there are a number of countries that do. So there are some fishing interests still in the South Atlantic. So how the negotiations then go is if the prohibition was not something that was going to be acceptable, and ICCAT makes agreements by consensus, so all parties need to agree. So the prohibition proposal wasn't acceptable. So the EU then came forward with another proposal, which was for 1,000 tons of total mortality. Previously, it had been over 2,000 tons, so this represented a 50% decline in the permitted retention of mako from the South Atlantic. So a retention allowance was then calculated, which is well below that 1,000 tons, to ensure that there's a buffer in there for any additional mortality. So any additional makos that unfortunately don't survive release, etc. So this is a positive thing. We've seen a 50% decline in the overall TAC for shortfin mako in the South Atlantic. And if you add into that the countries that have now adopted domestic measures that don't permit retention, then we should see a significant reduction there. But one of the things we do really need to see in the South Atlantic is better reporting. We need to see, well, across the Atlantic, better reporting, more discard reporting. So there's a clear set of figures, clear data from which future mortality levels can be calculated. So there's a strong encouragement and urging there for parties to report better. And in fact, if they don't report, there's penalties built into the proposal or into now the recommendation, because that was something that was successfully adopted. So we saw successful adoption of a recommendation for South Atlantic mako with a 50% reduction in the allowed catch, which is also a really good thing.
Yeah, so good news for the shortfin mako. That 50% decrease in TAC in the South Atlantic is going to be massive for them, especially with that buffer. And when you explained the maths to me earlier, and you just kind of went through it a bit there, with those countries that also won't be retaining them anyway in the South Atlantic, hopefully that'll be below the 1,000 anyway. And yeah, and highlighting the importance of accurate recording and accurate data. Where obviously we base everything off of science. So if we have the best evidence to us, it's going to be a lot easier. Let's go into the next proposal. I'm always going to get sadder again because it's not gone through for years. But let's go for fins naturally attached.
So finning regulation, fins naturally attached. Again, year on year, we push this forward as best practice with a strong support from a large number, the vast majority of parties. But it's something that the parties from Japan and China aren't willing to accept. And this year, Japan put forward a counter proposal that unfortunately had fins naturally attached, but with alternative measures, which we believe strongly create loopholes for bad practice. and very, very strongly believe in adoption of fins naturally attached with no exceptions. This is a position that's strongly supported by the EU, by the UK, by a large number of other parties who spoke very passionately to the floor of the meeting on these issues. It's disappointing that yet again we come away with nothing on this point, but we will continue to strive to see fins naturally attached adopted in ICCAT, as it is in the Mediterranean, in the North Atlantic, both on the west and the east. And it's something that we will see and will seek to see adopted within ICCAT as well.
Yeah, I think even, obviously it's a bit of a setback. I'm only 3 years into this, but obviously this is like 17, I think it is for you or something. So yeah, probably feels like a bit of a knock. But we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying. Keep our chins up. And yeah, look for the positives in what we can get.
The consolidated proposals that I mentioned earlier, well, as I said, they tend to create opportunity for parties to seek to adjust aspects of the recommendations. They've become quite a complicated issue, and the two proposals that were put forward, one from the EU and one from Japan, they sought to consolidate them, but these were not considered to be appropriate or ready for adoption, and so both of those proposals. Well, the consolidated as such, the one proposal that came from the two different ones, failed to be adopted. We then saw a number of other issues come forward. So we had the exemption process for the shark check sheets. Although that wasn't a proposal in as such, it's now considered a procedure that countries will need to follow, which is a really positive step forward. And we saw various other aspects of work in some of the other panels start to progress. So all in all, it was a very constructive meeting. So we had the prohibition for the white shark and the basking shark. We saw a 50% reduction in the short fin mako in the South Atlantic, and we saw this exemption procedure, this compliance procedure, adopted for the shark check sheets, which is great.
Yeah, overall, it seems like a very positive meeting for sharks this year at ICCAT. Yeah, some great proposals that have come through, good protections. I think fins naturally attached would have been that little cherry on top. But maybe we'll get that next year. So Ali, what's next? What's next for you? What's next for the Shark Trust?
So what's next? Well, we still have an outstanding stock assessment for the short fin mako in the North Atlantic. There's work in the pipeline for blue sharks with different management procedures. We have the need for a double down on the bycatch mitigation activities. So where we have now a host of prohibited species, whether that's oceanic white tips, the hammerheads, some of the work with the silky sharks. We've now got the whale sharks, Manta immobula. Basking sharks, white sharks, we really need to see more work done on bycatch mitigation and avoidance, and really that reporting of bycatch. So there's absolute rife underreporting throughout the IOTC convention area, and we really need to see, focus on that bycatch reporting.
Yeah, so a lot to do there. Yeah, a lot of species that have got these protections in, and it's those kind of bycatch mitigations that need to go through. So yeah, a lot of work to do.
So that's not really that succinct, Mark, but it was 10 days of meetings. So it's quite hard to boil that down just to a few minutes of conversation. But we've got a lot to do going forwards. There's an awful lot to do in 2026. I think one of the key things that came out of the meeting was the importance of the relationships that you build through the year by being in those meetings, being in those rooms. They really come to bear when you come to the annual meeting, and you need to make, sort of engage people with a sense of urgency. And if they've known you through the whole year process, it makes life an awful lot easier. So there's there's a reason why we contribute to the whole process of ICCAT, from data prep through to the commission meetings at the end of the year. And, you know, we are pleased. We're disappointed with some of the aspects that weren't achieved, but we are pleased with what we managed to see go through this year. And, you know, it puts us in a good position to tackle more challenges in other ocean basins and really see traction for what's been adopted so far.
Yeah, I think highlighting the importance of being in those meetings. People don't really, I think, understand how important it is to be in the room itself. And you're doing that throughout. You know, some online, some in person. In person, obviously, is always going to be more beneficial because you're more likely to be heard. But you've built those relationships, and then when you get to these annual meetings where proposals are going through, you know who to talk to, they know who you are, and you can actually work on those things. You kind of build that trust, build that credibility, which can be massively important. So yeah, a positive year. Thank you very much, Ali. And yeah, I'll see you in the office and we can see what we're working on next.
This episode is brought to you by Surf Ears, the earplugs that let sound in but keep water out. Perfect for diving, surfing or snorkeling. Surf Ears 4.0 feature a re-engineered fused core and mesh design, paired with tough silicone rubber, making them more durable than ever. They're designed with sustainability in mind, using materials like ocean plastic and recycled silicone. We've tried them and honestly, they're a game changer. Comfortable, eco-conscious, and they actually work. Thank you Surf Ears for sponsoring this episode and keeping our ears happy and healthy.